Welcome into the New Orleans Pelicans Podcast presented by SeatGeek, a podcast dedicated to everything you need to know about the squad.
Reverse two-hand dunk for 41 points, Trey Murphy!
With style, Trey Murphy giving him the Oprah game. You get a bucket and you get a bucket.
He did it with panache.
The New Orleans Pelicans Podcast starts right now.
Welcome to the Pelicans Podcast presented by SeatGeek. I am Joe Cardosi, joined by the starry-eyed Jim Eichenhofer. We are continuing our series of player wrap-ups, sort of player profiles as this season has ended. We're looking at the squad and who got us here and what we can expect going forward. Today, we're going to be doing Trey Murphy, but we're going to continue this series as we go on in the week.
Yes, week 2 is going to be kind of the second unit, or what we thought was going to be the second unit going into the season. Again, I reiterate that the player recaps are going to be on guys that played at least 900 minutes or more, with Zion being the guy that played at 900 plus. Everybody else played more than that among the group of players that we're going to cover. Trey Murphy today, like you said, Jose Alvarado on Tuesday, Larry Nance Jr. Wednesday, Naji Marshall Thursday, and then wrapping it up on Friday with Dyson Daniels. So we're going through, some of the guys that were key elements of the second string, although Trey Murphy ended up starting the vast majority of his games that he played in. He actually didn't even come off the bench very much.
Yeah, it's almost weird to have him in this second week because he started so many games. It's almost odd that he is not above Zion, I guess, in the order of things, but we had to go with our initial, what was supposed to be starting five here. Trey got sort of hoisted into the starting lineup, and the great thing about it was he didn't wither in the spotlight. He shined this season, and I think, even some of the most optimistic of us, I think we were surprised by Trey Murphy's ascendance.
Yes, and I think in his exit interview, even he sounded a little bit surprised. I don't know if surprised is the right way to put it, but I don't know if he necessarily went into the season expecting to make the impact that he did.
Well, when you grow 1,000,000 inches in a couple years and then you're having to get stronger with your new body, it's kind of hard to predict how you're going to adjust. And when you're finding these new aspects of your game with a now 7'1" wingspan, I'm sure it's hard to predict what you're going to be good at so early. But man, did he fly through the process?
Yeah, I think he had kind of some exponential growth, not just physically, but just also the kind of player he was on the court. It seemed like, as his confidence grew and as he had games where he made 9 3-pointers, then all of a sudden he's making 10 for 12 against the Clippers. It just seemed like what he was capable of, I think, in his own head kept expanding to the point where by the end of the year, he was so confident in his shot. And he should be. We watch him in the practice gym make like 15 threes in a row from 35 feet.
It's always Eichenhofer and Trey Murphy just draining threes
neck and neck.
in the practice
so
gym.
Close. Yeah, such a tight competition.
I think you're motivating him. He needs to keep pace with you. You're just in a polo shirt and khakis just raining threes. So
I think it's pretty safe to say you have to be able to beat the website writer in shooting.
Yes.
That's definitely part of the
but not every team has a website writer like yourself, Jim.
When they bring in guys for draft workouts, if they can't beat me, they just cross him off the list. They're like, this guy's undraftable.
Well, that's the thing. Jim can barely write, but he is an absolute ringer in the gym. So he was brought here to, write articles, but mostly just drain threes. And
I'm barely literate, but I can shoot.
The barely literate Jim.
That was how I hyped myself up when I was being interviewed for the job. I was like, you know what? I don't even know if I can put a complete sentence together, but I can make a jumper here.
He didn't even come dressed for the interview. He was just leaning back in a chair, just raining one-armed shots into a trash can saying, I can't read. What you got? And the Pelicans hired him on the spot. No, Jim is a great writer as well as a fantastic shooter. We're JK in here as the season is over. But, and Trey Murphy is one of the funniest dudes on the team, I've got to say.
He's awesome.
Like listening to Trey Murphy, he's just so much fun to root for. Both, finding his game and watching it sort of grow. And then his personality. He's just a fun dude.
I noticed when he was a rookie that he seemed to be, there were multiple rookies on the team, but for some reason it seemed like the veteran players gravitated towards hazing him.
Yes.
But I think some of that was just his attitude. The other guys Jose's got like an amazing just backstory.
Yeah.
And Herb is so quiet, just goes about his business. Like, you don't want to mess with Herb.
Right.
Leave the guy alone.
Don't mess his sweatshirt up.
Trey's personality is such that I remember in particular, Devontae Graham seemed to always have a few words for him as far as some of the activity, some of the rookie duties that Trey needed to make sure he got done. He would just look the other way if Herb or Jose didn't do them. But if Trey were, neglected to take care of something, Devontae made sure he knew about it.
Yeah, Trey has ingratiated himself both to the team, the fan base. It seems like there are a lot of new Pelicans fans this season, and it's interesting to see people that you wouldn't necessarily think of as sports fans. Like, I'm walking down Magazine Street, there's a hipster with like a beard made of bees wearing a Trey Murphy sweatshirt, and that's just cool to see. That they love Herb Jones, the hipsters, and they love Trey Murphy because they love to be ahead of the curve, and those are the indie dudes, I guess, in the basketball scene to watch because they are emerging.
I haven't really thought about it that way, but that is an interesting kind of perspective that Trey's kind of like the artist that, only the really diehards know about. And I mean,
get in early.
Everybody knows Zion and Brandon Ingram and CJ McCollum.
The pop hits.
But Trey is that guy. I mean, if you were paying attention at the end of the season too, you saw him have some games that were worthy of, some of the bigger names across the league. So just an outstanding season for him. And I guess I'm glad that we're starting this week with Trey Murphy because it's you could make the case that it was maybe the most positive developments of the season in terms of the improvement and strides that he made. Yeah,
and same. And for one, he's just fun to cover. For another, there's so much of his game to talk about. And I could do a 4-part podcast on Trey Murphy, just like a docu-series, like a true crime person. But we got to stick to one a day here. So we're going to bring in our friend and yours, Erin Summers, our sideline reporter. Every home game you can catch her walking into the studio right now. So let's get to her. Miss Erin Summers. Joining us live in the Pelican studio. So nice not to be talking to a telephone and to see a real live human being, human contact. Erin Summers.
What's up?
It is nice to see you. It seems like forever since the season ended sometimes. I know we're still in the building sort of doing stuff, but it's not the same. And we've been in a weird mood, I guess, talking about recapping when we still want to be talking about the playoffs. But you've been busy, as always, of course. We've been seeing your coverage of sort of covering the same stuff we are, season recap stuff. No one more fun to talk about than Trey Murphy. I mean, how much fun was he to cover?
Trey Murphy is phenomenal in so many different ways.
Yes.
The personality that he brings, he's so engaging with not only his teammates, but the media.
Yes.
He's very easy to talk to. He's fun to talk to. He's honest. Great person, if you really want to get insight on the game to go to. And then just the way he plays this year. Yeah. He talked so much about what he wanted to work on over the summer last year, and you saw the work that he put in translate immediately at the start of the season. The way he was able to put the ball on the ground, go to the hoop, his dunk ability.
Yes, his bounce improved. Yeah.
I mean, he just changed his game up so much, became so much more versatile. And then even on the defensive end, I feel like he kind of took a step
underrated.
forward.
He was the second in shot blocking, second in steals on the team. And I know Herb gets a lot of the, rightfully so, a lot of the shine on that. But he really improved that part of his game, sort of under the radar, it seems like. Jim.
One of the things that always cracks me up about Trey, when you mentioned how he's always good in his press conferences and post game when he's kind of recapping the game, he always has that look on his face like he's waiting for somebody to say something that's going to set him up.
Eye. Yeah.
He's like ready to pounce always.
Yeah.
And it seems like
that's what I like about it.
It feels like maybe once or twice every single game someone will ask a question that like sets him up perfectly. I think he goes into press conferences with there's like one or two quips that he has in his head that he's just waiting for the right.
Wrist.
Yeah. So
he does. He kind of gives you the side eye. Like in his exit interview, and I did this when he first got here. I asked him about the NCAA tournament, and they got booted. Virginia lost the first. They were like the number 1 overall seed. They lost the first game, so it's a very sore subject for him. And somebody asked about the NCAA tournament it was towards like the play-in game stuff, and he just gave me the look, and I was like, let's just not talk about that.
I feel like
you want to tell him, or am I going to do this one?
Yeah, I feel like him and CJ, there's just such a great locker room chemistry. Larry Nance, there's so many great verbose, funny talkers, media savvy members of this Pelicans team. But, he's fun to cover, but also he's great. TM3 joined Kevin Durant as the only two players in the NBA this season to shoot 60% from two, 40% from three, 90% free throw line. He's also the youngest player to ever do that at 22 years old. And so, we don't want to get ahead of our skis here and start being like, he's the next Kevin Durant. But it's fun to have a guy like that as your third, fourth option on a team.
Yeah.
It's pretty heady times.
And how about the fact that he did that in his second year to be in the company of Kevin Durant? I feel like sometimes I forget how young he is too. I mean, or just the fact that, he didn't play a ton as a rookie. So you think about the strides that he made from his rookie year to his second year.
Yeah.
And it's really exciting just to think about the potential and promise that he has.
I think he's still growing into his game because he didn't really start playing until later. He grew.
That's what we're talking about. He had to figure out his new body.
Yeah,
so
he was not that tall for the majority of his basketball career.
Yeah.
And he said he didn't even start dunking until he was a senior in high school.
Right.
He just couldn't.
Yeah.
So there's so many elements of just his physical body and getting used to playing that I think we're still going to see him grow a lot.
Yeah.
When you saw him during the exit interviews, unfortunately I wasn't able to be there in person, but I watched it after the fact.
You're there in spirit, my friend.
Thank you, Joe.
Yeah.
Did you feel like that he even seemed a little bit taken aback about the strides that he made or what some of the stuff that he was able to do by the end of the season in terms of 40-point games, 10 3-pointers, almost set the franchise record for threes? Do you feel like even from his standpoint that he's a little bit ahead of where he thought maybe he would be at this point in his career?
Absolutely. I remember speaking to him before the All-Star weekend, before the dunk contest, all that stuff. And he was like, it's wild for me to be going to the Rising Stars game, to be in the dunk contest. Like he said, I didn't start dunking until, senior year of high school. These are things that I never even thought I would be able to do.
Yeah.
He never even thought he was going to play in the NBA for a long time.
And I was gaining a superpower. I could dunk now.
Yeah, and now he's in very elite company in a lot of ways. And so I think, he said, it's a really cool story. If you step back and from the outside look at the progress that he's made, the leaps that he's made from high school to college. He started at Rice and then he transfers to Virginia. Then he's like, you know what? Maybe I could do this as a career. It's really cool. I kind of think it's a testament to, him deciding I can do this and putting the work in. And that's why I think he's just going to continue to get better.
Well, it just seems like as his tool bag grows, it's just basically limited to his imagination and picking up that skill set. He got taller, he got stronger, he figured out he can go to the rim. And now you can draw up plays where he's cutting and slashing. You don't just have to have him spot up three. And you have to account for him basically everywhere on the floor. You'd like to see him get a little bit more of a mid-range. That's nitpicky. But at this point, you got B.I. for the mid-range. You got Zion in the paint. And you got Trey doing basically whatever he wants wherever on the floor. It's just a fantastic thing to see him sort of figuring out what he is now able to do in real time.
I think some of his background too, it kind of makes sense of why sometimes that he was kind of hesitant to take shots with guys in his face or take 3-pointers from deep when he wasn't necessarily totally open. If there was one thing that seemed like a theme in terms of the message from his teammates and the coaches and everyone really was, don't be afraid to shoot. Don't hesitate. We believe in every time you shoot that it's going to go in. And I feel like maybe his background, obviously he wasn't super highly recruited based on the fact that he ended up at Rice. No offense to Rice, but it's not a prestigious
powerhouse.
A North Carolina or something like that.
Shout out.
Had to say that with Erin being here.
Yes.
But yeah, I feel like it's kind of understandable that it was a process for him to get to the point of realizing it's okay for me to take 12 3-pointers in a game. Even if I start out a game 2 for 10, I still should take the next 5 that come to me.
Right. And he talked about how he got more comfortable with people in his face, shooting regardless. If he saw the rim, he would shoot, or if there was a little bit of daylight, he was comfortable putting the ball on the ground and going downhill instead of trying to force something or passing the ball off. So adding that other element to his game made him more of a threat because the defense had to be ready for him to either shoot from outside or go by them. So, I mean, they couldn't play him as probably tight on the perimeter, so it's, he did a lot for himself too. And I think as he continued to see the ball, fall, he got more confident.
Yeah, and I mean, that was one thing I wanted to ask you about. I mean, obviously we saw the growth from him on the floor. We got to see his game change, and he came into the league, cocky and fun. But did you see any difference from him this season, sort of off the court, behind the scenes?
So I think there is a lot more growth that took place for him mentally in year one. If you think about it, in March of his rookie season, he was playing in the G League.
Yeah.
Like, he was in Birmingham and he was not happy about it, and you mentioned it, like he is a little cocky. And I think that he had to kind of swallow some of that pride and put in the actual work and catch up to the level that the NBA is, like Virginia is a great basketball program, but their game is the way they play is very different than how they play in the NBA. And so I think he had to figure out, defensively what that looks like. Yeah. And then he had to get comfortable in his offensive game, how he can be more aggressive. And it was a lot for him that first season. I mean, there are conversations that I had with him where I was like, God, I just want to give you a hug. Like, are you okay? Yeah. You can just see it in his face sometimes. And this year, he's just kind of walking around like a little more like with his chest puffed out a little more.
He belongs here. Like he sort of feels like he belongs instead of trying to find his place. It's a huge mental shift you got to take. Yeah.
I thought one of the interesting things about his rookie year too was it was kind of a shock in terms of the regular season, because if you think back, he rolled right into Summer League and was awesome, was one of the best players in Summer League.
Yeah.
In preseason, he was on fire.
Yep.
So the whole time when preseason ended, I was like, he's going to go in and make a huge impact, and it didn't happen. So that was a really tough adjustment, I'm sure, mentally for him and emotionally, to realize, like, at that point you were thinking, based on the first few months of him as a pro, everything was going great, and then all of a sudden now you're not making shots, and you're just struggling to do what you've done for the last few years.
Yeah. I know. I mean, I think a lot of us were like, let Trey play. Like, we saw the glimpses of this, but I think it was the right move to, have him go through some of those growing pains his rookie year. And then even like CJ McCollum had his podcast early this past year where he talked to Trey Murphy. He talked about Trey, and he was like, Trey is going to be as good as he wants to be. Like, he just has to put in the work.
Yeah,
like,
really
he just has to
decide
that that's what he's going to do, because physically he has the body that, would be perfect for everything that we've seen him do.
His skill set fits any NBA offense.
Right. And so, it's just a matter of what he decides he wants to be. And I think like CJ's been around, like he knows the game very well. Yeah. And he speaks so highly of Trey and his ability to play.
The most improved player winner, Lauri Markkanen, he got that way. I guess the most recognition was from, he's a fifth-year player. He's been around a little bit. He had that awkward sort of stint with the Bulls and, sort of started to come on and really broke out this year. And most of it was offense. He got recognized for being the first NBA player with 200 threes and over 100 dunks in a single season. Trey Murphy wasn't that far off. Trey Murphy's 22 in his second season. He had 202 threes and 85 dunks.
Yeah.
And we just saw the uptick in his usage this season. I think it's very attainable for Trey Murphy to get those kind of numbers and maybe be seeing most improved player. Now, how much of that would you attribute to him sort of accidentally being foisted into the lineup? I mean, he wasn't supposed to get those starter minutes. Those were supposed to be Zion's minutes. It was sort of an accidental growth spurt. I mean, how much would you attribute his growth to sort of being forced into the role?
Yeah, I mean, he had the opportunity and he seized it.
Yeah.
And he made the most of it. And that's what you have to do in the league. Like, you're not going to be handed minutes. And when he got them, he was effective. He ended up starting 65 of 79 games played. Yeah. 79 tied Jonas Valanciunas for the most played this season. I mean, he was very reliable.
And he wasn't really nicked up. Jonas had to deal with a lot of injuries and stuff. We talked about, CJ playing a lot of games, nicked up and stuff. But Trey Murphy was, steady pretty much the whole season. Fingers crossed that continues. But
he played
reliable.
over 30 minutes a game So that was, higher than what Jonas was able to do.
Yeah.
But he went from scoring 5 points a game to over 15 a game. Like he doubled his usage, I guess, but he was very productive.
Yeah, he also doubled his points. Like he
More
was
than-
efficient in those
Right.
minutes, and I guess that's what Jim is. That do you think that's going to continue? I see no reason for Trey Murphy to be slowing down.
Yeah, I mean, to your guys' point, his percentages increased across the board. So he played more minutes, and he got more shots, but he did a lot more with
He was efficient.
relatively
Very.
with the shots that he got. So by the way, too, I think he really just came on too late to be part of the serious most improved player conversation.
Yeah.
I do think that
Through no fault of his own,
Markkanen
really.
not only was the most improved player in the league this year, but he might have had the most improvement I've ever seen from a guy like 4 or 5 years into his career in the last 20 years.
I sort of thought I knew what Lauri Markkanen was.
Right.
Serviceable.
It was going to be tough to beat him out, I guess is what I'm
Yeah.
saying.
Yeah.
But Trey, I think Trey, by the time that he made a big jump, which was really the second half of the season, was the most prominent part of Trey improving. People had already decided, like, okay, here are the 3 or 4 guys that have a chance for most improved player.
Yeah.
Markkanen's probably going to win it, but here's the other guys. So I thought Trey actually could have been a nominee, but it was kind of just a little bit too late. But in terms of
But he's
next
22. There's lots of time.
Right. In terms of next season, though, I mean, I definitely think that he has a chance to make another big jump. If we start to see him have games like he had against the Clippers where he made 10 3-pointers, I'm not saying that he needs to do that once a week or whatever, but if you start to see him put together some of the games he had in the last couple of months of the season from the beginning of the year, you're going to see his scoring average and everything just continue to spike from where it was this year.
Wait, how much do you think he surprised people in the dunk contest?
I mean, I think he surprised himself in the dunk contest a little bit. It seemed like we were talking about it beforehand. I remember when he was just sort of talking about working on a double clutch dunk, like in the lab, and then he pulled it out in the dunk contest.
Yeah.
But now he pulls out like every other game. It's just a part of his arsenal. It just seems like he figures out a fun thing he can do, and then he's like, oh yeah, now I can do this.
It's fun, like watching from the, where I sit, like close to the bench, close to the court. Like I can see him a lot. It's kind of like laughing, at himself sometimes. Like, man, I just did that. Or like, if it's like someone hits him for an alley or like there's a great pass or whatever it is, he just kind of like, he's like a little kid still in that. Like he's having a lot of fun. And I think, like you mentioned, he's surprising himself still. And I think that's where his confidence will continue to grow. And maybe he will start next season, where he left off this year, right? Like a little bit more confident, consistent from the jump.
One of the coolest things to me when I look back at his participation in the dunk contest, besides the fact that he incorporated Jose and Grand Theft Alvarado,
Yes, it was so
is
great.
the fact that I think in a lot of ways, Trey wasn't necessarily, by that point in the season when he was selected by January, he wasn't necessarily known around the league as like some amazing dunker.
Right.
But this kind of ties into his personality. I think his individual campaign that he ran where he would mention like, hey, I want to be in the dunk contest.
Yes.
I think that was a big part of him getting picked. And if you're the league, if you're the NBA, you have to love that in an era when a lot of guys are like, I don't think I want to do the dunk contest. You have somebody who's consistently saying like, yeah, put me in there. I want to be in there. I want to be in the 3-point contest and the dunk contest. So that part, again, going back to the kind of person he is and why he's likable, it was just refreshing, I think, to see somebody who was so all in on just being part of it.
And that was his breakout for a lot of people. That was the first time a lot of like casual fans got
Yeah.
to see him. And now when they hear about Trey Murphy having those good games, like, oh, the dunk contest guy, if they are casual.
Yeah, I love that he wasn't super gimmicky either. Like he was, it was really impressive just dunks. Like, the one thing he did with Jose, I remember he was practicing that after a practice and the media was around waiting for interviews and Larry came over and he was like, if I see this anywhere, like I'm coming for you, like pointing to all the media,
Good. We need a goon. 'Cause that was worth the reveal. Another thing I got to say before we let you go that makes me feel much better about Trey Murphy is, I feel like the Grizzlies are a bit of a rival now. And somehow Dylan Brooks almost has me rooting for LeBron. I don't know. But, it's just
not there yet.
It's funny to think that we traded, and as part of that Jonas trade, the pick swap of 10 and 17, got that 17th pick, got Trey Murphy with that pick. Meanwhile, the Grizzlies got Zaire Williams, who's barely played.
Yeah.
Just saying. I just like to be petty.
Man, I love Trey Murphy, and he gives me a lot of, and I'm not going to curse, but ish.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah.
You know, like every day. I'm like, what's it going to be today, Trey? Like, you going to be nice to me today or not? And I appreciate his dad sticking up for me because his dad has told Trey to be nicer to me. And
Good.
So just love the whole family. They're great.
They're awesome.
I was about to say we'll have to start bringing Jim around when Trey's there just to be your muscle, you know. But we'll see. Erin, thanks so much for hopping on the podcast with us. Great to actually have you in the building. Great to be talking Trey Murphy. But thank you for joining us. And I have a feeling we'll be talking to you again soon.
Love that.
Foreshadowing. Big thanks to Erin Summers, a busy bee as always, buzzing about the facility, as it is a crazy time in the quote-unquote off-season. As we continue this series, going to be fun to talk about the players ahead.
It really is, and I think this might have been the longest episode we had so far. We did almost talk about him for forever. So.
Yes.
Yeah, no, it was a great story this year. I'm really looking forward to seeing what he's going to do next season, and I think his opportunities are only going to increase in terms of showing his ability on the floor.
Yeah, for sure. He showed no reason to slow it down now. I got to talk a little bit about the playoffs because, I'm still watching it. I'm still sort of jealously watching it. It was crazy to watch the Bucks go down like that, wasn't it, Jim?
It really
I know
was.
It's a little old now, but just shocking.
No, I think it was kind of a sad moment for New Orleans basketball fans because obviously I think there's the two elements of a lot of people want to root for Milwaukee because they're a small market, especially.
And Giannis is fun.
Yeah,
and
Giannis is
Drew.
great. Giannis is. I consider Giannis and Damian Lillard kind of the patron saints of small markets because they've been with the same team in a non-glamorous city for a long time, and they never complain. They seem extremely happy to be there, and so I appreciate that a lot. And also obviously the factor with Drew Holiday being in Milwaukee. I know a lot of people around here were happy to see him win a championship a couple of years ago.
Much deserved.
And I was just shocked, though, of the fact that the Heat were able to knock them off. I mean,
just so handily. I think that's what's shocking about it. Is, look, I love Jimmy Butler. I love just the mentality he brings to the game, and I expected them to make a series of. I did not expect them to just blow the Bucks out of the water.
And I'd have to look this up, but I'm pretty sure of the 8 seeds that have beaten 1 seeds, there haven't been that many. But it's never been in 5 games or less. So that was the most decisive series victory. I was stunned. I mean, I think everyone was. I thought there was no way that Miami can even necessarily hang around and even go 7 games. Not only did they do that, but they won the series in 5. So.
And it's not like you look at their roster and you're like, how do you overcome that with the Heat? It was really just Jimmy Butler going full God mode and the Bucks having no answer for it. I often talk about, how Jimmy Butler, just that old school, almost 80s basketball mentality.
Yeah.
But, man, when he turns it on, it's just scary to watch. And now, man, look out for the Heat. Who knows what could happen in these playoffs? It's just so wide open. I think that's another reason why we've been so frustrated talking about the end of the Pell season, whether it be the East, whether it be the Western Conference. It just seems like who knows what's going to happen in these playoffs.
I mean, who thought that there was going to be a second-round series between the Heat and the Knicks, too.
Yeah.
So, I mean, there's been a lot of stuff that's happened that's been fun. I mean, it's been – I thought the first round was really entertaining. There were so many good games. There was a couple series that weren't that great, but for the most part, there were a lot of entertaining basketball games and a lot of games that went down to the end. So it was a lot of fun, but I would say definitely – the Bucks getting knocked out was the most stunning thing that happened in the first round.
I was shocked. So I guess we'll continue to watch these playoffs and see what happens. We will continue to do these player wrap-ups as you will. Tomorrow we will have Jose Alvarado. Mr. Larry Nance will be our subject on Wednesday. Thursday will be Naji Marshall, and then Friday we'll be wrapping it up with the Aussie, Mr. Dyson Daniels. So, Jim, thanks again for helping this old dog out through another podcast.
Well, thank you, Joe. It's been fun so far, and we've got a little bit more ways to go. And before we finally put a bow on the season, and then we'll be talking about the draft lottery not
Yeah.
that far after that.
And by the way, Jim is driving again now. So if you see the car Dragula that Rob Zombie used to drive, just rolling down Airline, that's Jim. Just get out of the way, man.
I paid a good penny for that vehicle too.
Yeah,
I'll tell you.
Well, it's just because he's friends with Rob Zombie too, but that's just Jim. He's a metal animal. We will talk to you once again. What? Tomorrow? Yes, we will, and we will be talking about Jose Alvarado then. So until then, go Bills!
Thanks for listening to the New Orleans Pelicans Podcast, presented by SeatGeek. Join us 3 times per week on Pelicans.com, the Pelicans mobile app, or you can subscribe to the podcast on iTunes. We'll see you next time right here on the New Orleans Pelicans Podcast, presented by SeatGeek.